Welcome everybody to another Sandler webinar. This is the third in our series of small business big sales. We have talked about common sales challenges and how to overcome them, why your salespeople fail and what to do about it. We have talked about sales management, why sales managers fail and what you can do about it, some of their common problems. And this time we're talking about those executive leadership positions, the owners, the presidents, the CEOs who have control of the whole organization, why some organizations fail, and what you can do about it to solve those problems. So our special guest today here next to me is Dave Hiatt. He is one of our directors of franchising for Sandler, but he is also in charge of our organizational excellence program. And that's really where the content that you'll hear today comes from. And he helps train our trainers on this program across the world. So we're lucky to have him as a guest, also a fellow Sandler author. So congratulations on the book again, Dave. Sandler, if you're not familiar, you should be, since this is the third webinar in a series, but we do sales, management, and organizational leadership training all around the world for over 30,000 people a year. The people you see in the picture are not us. That's David Sandler, our founder, and Dave Mattson, our current president and CEO. And really, this is what we do day in and day out for people in, I think, about 30 countries, 17 languages, and over 250 locations where we work with small, medium-sized businesses all the way up to large Fortune 1000 enterprise organizations in how you fix sales management, and executive leadership. So you've heard me say a couple of times by now as well, but if this is your first webinar, at Sandler, we're not a quick fix company. We can't really improve your company and make it bulletproof by hearing us talk about it for the next hour. So you're gonna have to dive in, you're gonna have to apply this knowledge, develop some skills, and over time work on mastery of these communication and leadership principles that we're talking about today. So David Sandler, our founder, wrote the book, You Can't Teach a Kid to Ride a Bike in a Seminar. We can't teach you to make a bulletproof business in a seminar either, in an hour-long webinar. But what we can do is give you as much awareness of some problems and challenges you might be running into or might be hiding around the corner, and then as much knowledge as we can cram into the next 50 minutes or so about how to solve those problems or challenges. And then you got to take it from there. And if you need more help, don't forget to reach out to a local Sandler trainer. And there are tons of additional resources here as well. The website is sandler.com/smallbusiness. You can find all the special offers that go along with this webinar and the most relevant content to your position by going to that link, sandler.com/smallbusiness. All right, let's get started, Dave. We're going to dive right into it here. We've got a lot of leaders on the line today, and they may or may not at this point have seen this list. This list comes from the book that we released a couple of years ago on this topic. So tell us about these top leadership blind spots, where they came from, and how they might recognize if they have them.
Well, you know, the book, The Road to Excellence, I think is aptly titled because it is a road. And many of us, as we've been driving down a road, perhaps in a dark evening, with no street lights, we suddenly hit a pothole that we didn't see. Something that we didn't see ends up stopping our progress, sometimes damaging the vehicle. And it's through no fault of our own. It was just simply a blind spot. I don't know about you, but one of the best inventions they put on new cars recently are those little lights on your mirrors that tells you that someone's in your blind spot. Now, unfortunately, many business owners don't have those special blinkers when it comes to their business. Basically, many times, if they're fortunate, they have executives that will share blind spots with them. Sometimes the executives won't share the blind spots because it might cast a bad light on their particular division or what they're doing. Unfortunately, some leaders have the opinion that ignorance is bliss. And if you're going to build an excellent organization, the blind spots will get you. So in the book, we talk about some really ones that that have jumped out to us over the years that we've been talking with business leaders. I'm going to go through these very quickly. Then I'm going to pull out a couple that I think are very vital to talk about, Mike. Yeah. Not having a process for hiring, especially as these entrepreneurial businesses grow. They sort of hire where they can, and it looks good, sounds good, and off they go. But when you don't have a process to make sure you're hiring the right person in the right position, you end up at some point looking back and realizing that you don't have the right people, that they don't have necessarily the right skill set that you need. So that is a process that is vital. And then once you do hire them, not onboarding them properly, not making sure that they have and know what it takes to be successful in that position, and making sure that they go through and meet the right people, do the right things, take the right classes, take the right courses, so that they are up and running and they are fully functioning within typically a 2 to 3 month period at the longest. This one's interesting, failing to tie corporate goals to personal goals. And that works both ways. Very often leaders, business owners, really get hung up in the business goals and oftentimes will neglect personal goals. And I think that's just as much a blind spot that can harm the business, and not only the business, but your personal life as well. So I think you really need to make sure that your personal goals are tied to your corporate goals. In other words, that you as a business leader, you're working hard in that business to build that business so that you can accomplish and do and have and be your personal vision of what you want to do, have, and be. I think that's key. But then the other blind spot that comes with that, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about this, is when your people don't see that their personal goals are aligning with what you need from them within their job functions. Not creating a culture of accountability. Accountability is key. People need to know when they're winning or losing. And the better you can accomplish that, the more you can keep on top of that with people, the more successful people are going to be. And believe it or not, the happier they're going to be, because they're going to be able to know when they actually are performing well, and perhaps when they're not, and what they can do about it. So being accountable and holding people accountable is very often, I think, one of those blind spots that the ignorance is bliss comes in, right? Gee, they don't want to be micromanaged, so I won't. But then you never really know what's really happening and what's really going on. And then next thing you know, a quarter later, a year later, you're surprised when numbers aren't there or projects aren't finished. One that we see all the time, Mike, as you know, with all of our training centers, is not having a common sales language. They've hired these different people. They all come in. They have their own way of selling, their own language for what they call things. And the next thing you know, they've got 17 different sales managers across the country or across the globe. And there's 17 different sales languages out there. And we're not talking whether it's English or Spanish. We're talking, true sales language. I think what also goes hand in hand with the whole sales thing is not focusing on lead generation. I think once you do initial marketing, you start getting business calling you, you get customers calling you, you can get a little complacent and assume that what you've always been doing will continue to be successful for you. And I think that's something you need to constantly be looking at, or have that marketing VP or whoever it is constantly be assessing to make sure that we are staying fresh, that we are generating leads in the new technologies. And with the new mindsets that people have out there. I think that's key. Not capturing best practices, that applies to any position in your organization. If you do not know what the best practices are, if you can't pull out documentation to that new, and it should be part of your onboarding process, many of these are interwoven, you should be able to say, here's the best practices. If you want to be the most successful as you can be in this position, here are the things that the top people are doing. So how can you incorporate that into your mix of what you're doing? I think a very big one is failing to train and coach the management staff, especially sales managers. So many times sales managers are brought in because they were good salespeople. Go get them, Tiger. And they're never really given the management training, because those are two completely different skill sets. So what happens is you lose a good salesperson and gain a very mediocre at best sales manager oftentimes. Not building the bench. And that applies to any position in your organization. I know one of the companies I owned many years ago is we had a theory. Whenever anyone goes on vacation, assume they'll never come back. Right? So we always had that cross training. That's a blind spot that we got caught on once, right? And said, you know what? We got to have that bench. So we always had that cross training going on, so that there was always more than one person that could fill in for that person. Another blind spot is assuming that your people know how to coach their people. Assuming that you know how to coach your executives, because it really is from the top down. Because every level should be engaged in some form of coaching. And I think if you just let it go and assume people know how to do it, not necessarily true. I mean, true coaching is a skill set. You know, it's a behavior set. So I'm not sharing the vision with those who must implement it. So oftentimes, maybe you do have that vision. You know where you want that company to go. It's crystal clear to you, but unfortunately, you've not articulated it to the people that need to get you there. And therefore, what happens is they question, they're not sure, and you get down the road and people are not motivated, they're not sure, they're uncertain, and therefore their productivity is going to be affected by that. I love this one, fostering a culture of learned helplessness. That's when you as an owner, especially when you're first starting a business, that's when you as an owner feel that you can do it better than anybody. So you do it better than anybody. And the time it would take to train someone is too much time out of your busy day. So therefore you don't do it. And at some point you realize everything is coming to you. Right? Mm-hmm. Well, the sooner you can get rid of that blind spot and realize that that's going to happen unless you take proactive ways of stopping it. So that becomes critical. And then of course, no methodologies and systems and processes. I mean, I think those are the key ones. So if you look at, again, there's many other blind spots that businesses have, but these are the ones that the book focused on.
So we want to ask you, based on what Dave just outlined there, which one of those hit you right in the gut? Which one of those got you? When he said that, you said, man, that's our problem right there. Go ahead and type those into the chat. I think, Dave, we hear a lot of these. I hear onboarding a lot. I hear not tying company goals to personal goals. We don't know what our people are motivated for and why they're showing up to work every day. Common language and culture, lead generation you mentioned is a big one. And almost nobody works on coaching and how the managers are supposed to be behaving. They give them key performance benchmarks, but they don't give them really any sort of guidance or training on how to do that. They just tell them to get it done and go get them, right?
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely.
Anything else jumped out? You know, you've worked with tons of businesses and our trainers around the world when these problems, any of the other blind spots really jump out as something that you think people have a lot?
I think I've included a couple in here that I want to talk about, because I think those really do jump out a lot. And I think this one can be fatal to a company. And when I say fatal is you spend so much time as you start your company, as you're getting it going and finding those leads, or they just came easy to you, right? Mm-hmm. And then once the easy leads come, you assume it's always going to be easy. That's not the case. And if you don't have a process to generate leads, if you don't know how many conversations your sales team needs to have in order to hit their quotas, you're not really in control of the end profitability, because it starts with those kinds of lead generation numbers and understanding and knowing what it takes. Are you getting the right types of leads? Right? I mean, I know we you know, in the franchising, we're doing a lot of this lead generation, and there's a lot of them that just really aren't the right type, right? And that has to do with marketing adjustments, making sure that you're tweaking it to hit that right vertical, that right market, that right age group that's going to really be your customer. Does your compensation plan reward the right behaviors? Right? Are you paying people to just take care of your current clients that you've had around for the first 10 years of your company, right? Or are you paying people to go out and actually generate leads? Right.
Well, I think you nailed it there. And it reminds me of the old David Sandler line, our founder there. A winner has alternatives. A loser puts all their eggs in one basket. And I think you see that a lot with organizations, is that you grew up, and it might be great news. You might be doing 100% of your business on referral. But what happens if referrals stop coming in? That means you don't have any plan to do proactive cold outreach or one advertising medium is working really well. These Facebook ads are crushing it. We're getting a ton of leads. But what happens if Facebook changes the rules? If you're only doing one type of lead generation or not enough, you can really have a weakness in your business that can creep up. And something like we've all been going through here in 2020 can just completely destroy your business because it wasn't bulletproof.
And I highly recommend you don't put all your eggs in the cold call basket.
Yeah.
Right? The cold call basket should be that basket you go to when the other leads are exhausted, right? So you should always have that cold call available, but you need to make sure that you don't rely just on that, because that'll burn your salespeople out as fast as anything.
Yeah, you bet. And the other thing is that burns them out is not knowing what's important to them and why they're showing up. Tell us about this.
Yep, exactly. So let's go. I like this one. I gave you this one because failing to tie corporate goals to personal goals is huge. I think that most business owners are goal driven. I think most salespeople are goal driven. And I really believe that most employees do have a goal and they want to do a good job. But the problem is very often they don't know necessarily what a good job is or what it's leading to. Right? So therefore, if you don't know the personal goals of the people reporting to you, and again, that goes from the top down, if you don't know their personal goals, then you don't know how you're helping them achieve them or not. If I know that your personal goal is to take your family on that Mediterranean cruise that your wife and kids have always wanted to do, then I know that when I coach you, when I do those things, that I'm helping you do that. And therefore, I can constantly remind you of what that goal is and how you're performing in the company is helping you achieve and accomplish that goal. I'll never forget, we had one salesperson once who, previous company, right, in my past life, and loved Porsches, loved the Porsche, right? And we knew it, and he'd always talk about it, right? And so we set up some KPIs, we set up some key things, and amongst the leaders, we said, okay, here's what we're going to do. If he achieves this, right, we're going to provide him his Porsche. Okay, that's going to be our thank you for him, right? But we gave him a goal that was more than that. Okay, so we knew what our minimum was, but we gave him a goal that was more than that. And thank God this guy was an overachiever, right? Not only did he blow through our goal, he blew through his goal. And so when we presented him with the Porsche, of course, he was about in tears. It was awesome. It was unbelievable. The downside of that story was within 6 months, he had his license taken away.
Yeah, be careful what you wish for.
Yeah, exactly. You got to be careful on that kind of stuff.
I had a great question in the chat for you, Dave.
Sure.
Sarah asked this, and I think it's a great point, is sometimes those are intangible things. What do we do when it's a self-actualization goal or something that's not tied to money, like the Porsche or a vacation or something? Is there a way to translate or help people with those indirect goals?
Yeah, one of the organizations that we used as a foundation for the Organizational Excellence Program, one of the things that they did, if you wanted to get your MBA, right?
Oh, nice.
They would pay for it. If you wanted to go take a weekend retreat and learn how to meditate, they would help you do that. So I think when, the corporate goal was to create happy employees who are achieving not just at the company, but personally what they want. So they would tie those performance in. Well, then if that's the case and you want to go on that week-long retreat of spiritual learning or whatever it might be, great. That's what they would help them do.
I think that's great. Also, I'm thinking of career pathing, and sometimes titles or other things can be very motivating to people to see that as a status symbol more important than money sometimes. And that also takes us, I think, right into coaching, because if you don't know those things, it's really hard to coach and mentor somebody and help them develop their career path and improve their skills that they need to get to the next level if you don't know that they're trying to get there or where they're trying to go.
You mentioned one thing about motivation, and money almost is, for salespeople particularly, is almost never the number one motivator. And I worked many years ago in my 20s. I worked for a company called the McDonald Motivational Research Center, and it was all about what motivates salespeople. And it was the trips they could win. It was the competition they could win. Now, these folks were at a level where they were already making good money. Right. We're not talking about the people who have to make enough money just to pay the rent, right, and put food on the table. So once you take care of that, the motivators and the goals really do change. So, not knowing how to coach. You know, if you were to ask most sales managers, what areas do you need to coach your salespeople in? If you were to ask most managers, what area do you need to coach your team in? Whatever it is, it could be in customer service, it could be in production, right? Where do they need coaching? Everyone thinks that coaching typically comes from some kind of athletic endeavor, but coaching is really all about helping people perform better in their role. It's not teaching them what to do, that's training. Coaching them is saying, okay, now that you have the skills, now that you know what you're doing, right? My job is to help you execute that skill in the most effective, efficient, productive way possible. So let's talk about that. And it's never going to be, this is the way I did it. This is the way you have to do it, Mike. I did it this way, by golly, I was successful. Now that's not coaching, right? That's putting yourself on a pedestal and assuming that, you know, your way is the only way. Coaching is making sure that there's a conversation going on and helping them discover how they can in fact improve, how they can apply that skill, what they need to do to get better at that, right? And part of that's having a plan, you know, having that coaching plan of when you're going to coach, what you're going to coach, and having that formal thing set down so that they know and you know that's what we're doing.
I think it's huge, and it takes the counterpoint also to that one that you mentioned earlier of the culture of learned helplessness. Sometimes it is when you think you can solve it better than everybody else. I think that's a coaching problem. These two are tied together, because if you're firefighting and you're solving problems for your team, what you're not doing is coaching them on how to solve problems for themselves. And so this can become a serious blind spot that sucks up all of your time and doesn't allow people to become bigger and do more than you could accomplish by yourself individually.
Absolutely.
So that one's huge.
And, you know, you mentioned that, and I think, you know, talking about blind spots, as you were talking, I just looked down and I realized that I've become an orange person. And so I did a little coaching on how to fix my lighting so that I've got the lights I'm supposed to have, but for whatever reason, it's doing this. So at some point, would you coach me on that? Give me some tips.
We'll definitely do that after the webinar. We'll figure out how to fix those camera settings. I think we got time for one more here. So let's talk about the common language, because this is another one that if you don't fix it, it grows bigger and bigger. If you have all your salespeople or everybody in your company using their own language, doing their own processes, winging it as they go along, there's no way that you can streamline this stuff because you just don't have the systems and the language and stuff to talk about. Right?
You know, if you're in an accounting department at a company, you pretty much all speak the same language, because every course you go to for accounting has the same definitions. You know, a ledger is a ledger, an asset is an asset, debit is a debit. I mean, it's the same stuff that you're going to get no matter what school you go to, which is pretty good. The problem is it's probably not that way in any other department in your company, because that person's bringing their own stuff to it. Well, here's what we used to call it this, and we used to call it that. And then then the company has all these acronyms, these initials for everything. And at some point down the road, no one knows what they mean anymore. Right? So it just gets crazy. So when you're creating your plans and your positions, when you can create that common language for what it means, and I'll use a simple example in our Sandler language. We use a word called cookbook. Now, anyone who's been through Sandler knows what cookbook means. If I were to go to another company and start throwing the word cookbook out, most of them would look at me like I'm an idiot. We're not in cooking classes here. Why would you be talking about your cookbook, right? But when you have defined it and everybody knows it and everyone's consistent, that means even at the top,
yeah,
you have to be consistent as a leader in making sure that you use the same language that the team has chosen to use. Right.
And yeah, and this one to me falls into the proactive culture
Yep.
bucket. That there's a lot of these blind spots that are about proactively defining your culture. You're going to have a company culture whether you like it or not, right? So either they're making it up from the bottom up, or you have decided, you've made these choices, you're spreading the language you want to use, you're spreading the systems and best practices, and you're creating the culture that's acceptable of accountability. So that takes us to a point where we want you to evaluate yourself here a little bit. Based on the 13 blind spots and a few of those that we dug into a little bit deeper, where would you say you fall on this graph of business classifications? Is it at risk right now? Did the pandemic just wipe it out? You're really struggling. You got a lot of these blind spots and you don't know if you're going to make it. Average is we're kind of working along. Maybe the pandemic in 2020 limped us, but we're still moving forward. We're in the well-run spot. Maybe we've hit some roadblocks, but we're bouncing back. We feel confident about where it is. We don't have too many of these blind spots. Or excellent, we've been working on them all the time. We identify these things, we quantify the problems, we eliminate them. We have a process in place to continuously improve our company culture, our processes, our business, our people. All of those things. What would you say your business classification is? I won't ask you to type this one into the chat. You can share if you want, but keep this one to yourself and think about it, because I see all four of these as options in 2020. What do you think, Dave?
Yep.
And now we're going to transition these and ask you two more tough questions before we start talking about solutions. The first one is, in the last 12 months, how much do you think these blind spots have cost you by not solving these problems that we've identified? What would that really mean to you, your career, your organization, total revenue, profits? You can pick, I don't care, but see if you could put a number on it. If you could solve your biggest challenge right now, what would that mean to your organization? I know we've seen a wide range of answers right here, Dave.
Yeah, dollars, and notice some time. There's some time issues there too.
Yep. For sure. Stress. I know the last few months have been extremely stressful for a lot of people, and most of them come down to these blind spots. If you think about solving all of those three and just picture yourself with all of those solved, if you didn't have any of those, if we had a nice process for onboarding and recruiting and hiring, if everybody knew where they were going, all my managers were coaching their people, knew what motivated them, if we had leads coming in and stuff, what would that mean to you personally? And stress level and time and money. And then we need to ask yourself, yeah, you bet. One more question here. Are you willing and able to move your organization to that level of excellence? It's not going to be easy. There's no magic bullets here that will just, we'll solve that blind spot. It's good. It's squashed forever. We killed the weed. It's gone. No, these things keep popping up. When you take your eye off the ball for a minute, they pop up, right, Dave?
Entropy trumps excellence every time when you take your eye off of the ball and you let the blind spots take over. Disarray follows. Yep.
Yeah. So the moral of the story here is, if you decide today that you want to do something about it, you're going to have a lot of actions and a hard road ahead. There's no magic answers here that we're going to give you, but we can give you some of these systems and processes to put into place to develop an organization of excellence over time. And we said that again at the beginning. Dave, talk to us about this circle, why it's a circle, and our 6 P's that we're going to cover today in solving these blind spots.
Okay, well, obviously it's a circle because it doesn't have a beginning and an end. Now, we've chosen a spot the little #1 blue planning spot as a beginning. But as you go through this process with companies, what happens very quickly is they realize they're all interrelated, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you have to start somewhere. So you start with planning, go through positions, people, processes, Performetrics, which is performance measurements, right? And then your passion, the passion that you have and how it bleeds through the organization. And it doesn't end, because by the time you get through them the first time, you got to go through it again. Now it gets easier the second time, but not a lot. It gets a little easier the third time. But true organizations of excellence, leaders are constantly in this 6P process. Once you get into it, you shouldn't be getting out, because it's a process to keep you there. If you're not there, it's a process to get you there. If you are there, it's a process to keep you there.
I like that. And I think about it like going to the gym. The first time you go to the gym and work out, it's rough, right? But if you go every day and you're doing it on a regular routine, it gets easier and easier. You get healthier and healthier and stronger. You start seeing those results, and it builds a positive momentum. And I think this organizational excellence process is the same way. So let's start with #1 here: planning, creating your vision and action plans, and establishing benchmarks.
Okay, well, planning, there's really about 24 steps that go along with these 6Ps, right? And 10 of them are in planning, because we've all heard the adage that prior planning prevents poor performance, and continually planning prevents even poorer performance, right? So many times people will come up, businesses will have their strategic plan session, they put it in a drawer, and it goes away. We believe that if you're truly going to be an organization of excellence, planning is a never-ending task. And so as you go through it and you align your vision with your corporate vision and mission, right? When you do that, when you take a true environmental analysis of not just the political stuff, but all this, I mean, who saw COVID coming, right? But now that it's come in the future, I'll bet you, as you look at external environments, that's going to be in their plans. What if the next virus comes? How would we handle it? And it may never come for 3 or 4 more generations, but it might come next year, right? So that's all part of the ongoing planning process. As you're doing the planning, I think it's vital that you identify the priorities. What are the things that are going to get you to accomplish that company vision, so that you, the leader, can accomplish your goals and visions in your life, right? And so once we have those top maybe 10 priorities, when you can narrow them down to about 3 and make sure that you are laser focused on 3, and you're assigning the right people with the right resources to do what they need to do, and you're constantly monitoring the progress of those priority initiatives, once one's achieved, you then bring another one up from the top 10, so that you constantly have a top 10 and you're constantly moving them into 3. And the reason it's 3, you have a hard time handling much more than 3. Because what will happen is the urgent kinds of things happen. So if I have 3 priorities to get me to my long-term vision, I still have to deal with another 15 short-term things that are going to be happening every week, every day, every month, kind of thing.
Yeah, I love that. And it reminds me that we as leaders need to take enough time out to work on the business instead of in the business. And at Sandler, we have a great saying, which is stop mopping the floor long enough to turn off the faucet, right? If your basement's flooding, go shut off the water first, do that planning, then you can worry about cleaning up those messes. But like you said, those 15 things pop up when we release.
And the beauty of planning is that as things change, now you have a process that you can go back to and make much quicker adjustments, and therefore the effect of the whatever happens, it will be limited. It won't be necessarily as severe as it would have been.
Absolutely. And step 2 in our process is the organizational chart. Tell us about this.
Positions. In a perfect world, if your business, this is all the business leaders who are participating, in a perfect world, right? To create your perfect business, it's sort of an imagination exercise. Forget all the employees you have now. Forget all, whether, I don't care if they're family members, long-term friends, you have no employees. You have a completely clean slate, but you really know the vision for your company and the mission, what you really want to be accomplishing. Take the time to say, okay, with no conditions, what are the positions that I would need to make sure that I can have that vision? And what you'll find very often is some of the positions you have now are fine and they work well. Or you're going to realize that, my gosh, I really don't have this position in my company. And it could be some kind of disaster. I'm picking on the current thing, some kind of disaster person who handles all kinds of catastrophe things that could happen. In our world, it could have been some kind of digital online kind of position that we really didn't have, right? So what are the perfect positions that you would have? Then you go through and say, okay, what would those positions actually be doing? Okay, what would the key responsibilities be, right? And you would just break it down until you would have a job description for each position, for each employee within their position. So you do it for the positions under you, the positions under them. Now, of course, you might have help with as you go further down, but just think about it. Perfect world, perfect organization. What would yours look like? Is it different than what it is now?
I love that. And if you have a big organization, that might sound like a daunting task, but I'll give you two tricks. The first one is if you help the people below you, they help the people below them. You can work that out. And when you have people write their own job descriptions, you really learn a lot more about what they think is important in the role versus what you thought they were doing and what you thought was important.
No, another thing that comes out of that, Mike, is I think when you have that conversation with your executive team and you get pushback, right? And you get, because sometimes it's the pushback that helps you realize that maybe I was a little off base. Maybe that position should be more over here. Maybe it should be more around this. So when you can get those executive level people with you, talking to you about that, oftentimes you can you start it, but then you let them help you create it.
Yeah. Love that. So then we got to talk about how do we get people into those positions that we just created. Tell us about the people.
Well, you've got a company, so you've already got some people there. So when you did the positions, you weren't thinking of any personalities, of any people, right? All emotions were aside. It was just a logical fill in the positions. Now, who is going to fill those positions? I guarantee you some of your current employees are going to. What might surprise you is some of your current employees would fit in a better position than they are in now, based on their skills, based on what they know. So that's going to happen too. But remember, if you've got each position so that you know what it is you're looking for in that position, it becomes very easy then to assess the group that you have now to see who's going to fit those positions. And when you find that, and there will be some people who no longer fit, that's just part of it, and that's a tough part of it. But there'll be people that you need to bring in from the outside to fill positions that maybe no one inside can fill. And then that's where you really need to talk about those hiring processes. That blind spot of the hiring process can come into it. Because the last thing you want to do is bring somebody in who's not going to have the skill set that ideal position needs.
Yeah, ton of good stuff to unpack here. I will just say that we practice what we preach here. So both you and I have gotten new positions in the last 6 months as a result of going through this organizational excellence process. And so we noticed internally that we had a couple of problems. One, there was a few gaps that weren't being covered. Yep. And two, there were some bottlenecks where one person was doing way too much or making way too many decisions, trying to control too many buckets, and we needed to flatten it out. So I think you'll find where we need to consolidate, maybe two positions can become one, and other places where we need to break them up to create a more balanced organizational structure and allow your business to really hum, right?
Absolutely. Yep.
And that takes us right to processes, which is where are those bottlenecks? How are we benchmarking those great performances?
Here's a great thing, and I want to make sure people are aware of it. We put people before processes because good people will improve mediocre processes, or they'll create better processes. So once you get the right people in the right spots, I think when you have those people now working to create the processes, and you know, I know that a lot of us are doing that now with some of our rearranging and new positions that we have. And you know, creating the processes, while it's daunting and a challenge sometimes, it's really exhilarating if you can document a step by step to get a consistent outcome that you know you need and want to get you where you want to go. So that if you take that week vacation like we did in my past life and you never come back, you can hand those processes to someone and they can virtually accomplish it with very little difficulty.
Yeah.
It just makes it so much easier.
Well, this one's interesting, and I like what you talked about, those three. If we looked at like a baseball team or something, you know what positions you need to fill. Then you fill them with the best people. Then you draw the lineup, because we can't make the starting lineup until we know who's on the team, right? And so some of those processes and the way we handle things will depend on the skill sets of the people that we have in those positions, right? So I love how this is working out here. I guess, are there any other good tips on processes? I feel like this one is a challenge. Some people love processes and they stick to it and dive to it. Other people resist this because they will, well, I want to trust my people, or I'm a creative type. I don't want to be put into a box. Tell us a little bit more about this one.
Well, one of my sisters was a brilliant artist, and she was so process oriented. She was the creative,
wow,
you know, kind of person out there, you know, free spirit, but her artistic process was so well honed that I mean, you say, well, they're creative, they can do whatever they want. No, they don't. She had a process that was remarkably, amazingly complicated when she was painting and doing what she did. Yet her life was a free spirit. If you were to say to her that we're going to put rules and regulations on her, she's like, oh, no, you're not. But yet she's still very process oriented. And I think when it comes to these processes within an organization, people need to know where the boundaries are. They need to know what the process, what's acceptable, what's not acceptable. And I think when you can help them do that, they get to the end much quicker and much smoother. So I think the people who resist processes typically are ones who realize they have trouble sticking to processes and who need it more than probably anybody else.
Well, that's a great point.
And I'm a good example of that. I mean, by nature, I'm not necessarily a process guy, but I do know that when I create and follow processes, I'm more productive.
I like that. And I think it also takes us right to Performetrics here, because what I also feel in processes is that I worked in creative professions, in radio and in writing and stuff like that. And guess what? Professionals hit deadlines and they have a show every day. So they might be creative within their show, but there are those guardrails and there are shipment dates and there are, production requirements that we have to hit, even if we're being creative within that environment. So the radio is going on, it's on 24/7, whether we like it or not. We're either going to show up or not. So we can still be creative and deliver. And when you become a pro at this, you can work within processes and you can work to hit measurable benchmarks. You're not afraid of those things when you're a professional.
And process doesn't mean you give up who you are. It just means you follow certain steps to achieve an outcome. Now, if you don't measure that, right, when we're back at positions, every position should have a metric attached to it. What's the metric that we're going to be judged on as to whether we're doing a good job or not, right? It's not that, hey, you're doing good, go get them, Tiger. Keep up the good work. You've had a good year. That's not helping anybody. When you can tie the metric, when you know how many people that customer service person should be talking to on average a day, when you know on average about how many minutes for a good conversation, not just to churn them, right, but for a good conversation. Now folks can measure if they're falling behind, if they've got something to hold themselves to, they've got something to shoot for. every day. One of the best things I love, our sales accountability tool. I love that because it forces me to measure what I'm doing. And when I measure it, then it gives me good results, and I can tweak what I'm doing or not doing. And if you're not measuring, I don't care what position you are in a company, it doesn't have to be sales. What's your measurement? How do you know if you're doing your job well? One of my college jobs was working in a chrome plating factory, and I was busy buffing burrs off of metal, right, before it could go into the chrome plating. And you had to buff so many hundred of those a day, right? That was the criteria. Well, as I started out, I was lucky to get a third of that and lost half my knuckles, right? But as you knew what that thing was, as you worked closer and closer, you had that good sense of accomplishment, so that once you achieved it, now you knew you had a good day, and you were doing the same kinds of things that the other folks were doing. So you were holding your own.
You made a great point there, which takes us to our next one on passion. But you mentioned that people want to know that they're doing a good job. I think that's universal. So sometimes we think about measurement as accountability, and we're going to punish people if they don't hit their numbers. It's also rewarding people when they do. And I think a great question to ask yourself is, how would you as a leader know that every person in your company is doing a good job or had a good day? And I bet 80% of the people, you have no idea whether they had a good day today or not, or what the definition of success looks like. And if you don't know, chances are they don't know, which means they're making it up or they're stressed out. They might be thinking they're losing their job, and you're thinking that they're employee of the month. How would they know the difference, right, if we're not measuring? And also in today's world, so many things can be measured that couldn't before. And so we have automatic call tracking that can do voice analytics and tell you what people said on calls. We can be measuring all sorts of behavior that are used to be intangible things can now become measurable.
Yeah, and if people don't know how they're measuring up, they get demotivated.
Yeah.
If no one cares or no one's paying attention, then why should I?
Right. You know? If nobody's going to look, yeah, or say, well, then it's just up to me then and my own personal motivations, which are important, but I think a balanced mix of internal and extrinsic motivations are important.
Let's talk about passion. Because passion is that internal motivator, Mike. As a leader, most leaders start passionate about something. They've created a new gizmo. They've got some new thing that they want to do. They want to be on their own. They're passionate about starting something or leaving something, right? In many cases, I want to leave the corporate world, or I want I've got this invention that I want to take to the world. They're passionate about it. And as they grow that business, that passion comes through. And if they find that they're losing it, that you've got to rekindle the passion, which is exactly why you're connected right to that planning piece there, because that first thing in planning is what's your personal vision. Your personal vision should be your motivator for your passion. So it really does have this never-ending kind of fit to it. So if you're feeling it like your passion's waning, then you got to rekindle it. Now, as companies grow, as other leaders come in, they might be interested, but are they really passionate, right? I know that there's a lot of family businesses where the second generation comes in, and yeah, it's a good business, but have they lost some of the passion that dad or mom had? Yeah, they have. And by the time it's the third generation, now they're entitled because it's the family business, right? So you got to really be careful of that. And you got to make sure in the leadership and the leadership team has that passion for what they're doing, because what they're doing helps them accomplish what they are living for.
Yeah, so good. And to me, I think also it's just this natural sort of weathering and degradation of a business that if you're not putting effort into this, it's really easy. A customer complains and it kind of just rounds off one of your edges, right? And just a little bit gets knocked off every day or month, and the longer you're in business, and same with your employees. If you don't sharpen that soft and you don't go back to why you're doing it and refill that energy well, it's so easy to get drained, and you smooth off all the edges that made it interesting, and it becomes boring and dull, and it's bland stuff for bland people, and it's not fun anymore. But when you can keep re-energizing it and get back to why you do it and hear those great customer testimonials of people having success, and you're driving and you're hitting goals and you're looking at your Performetrics and your team's hitting your numbers, and you go, wow, it's something that can get re-energized and grow stronger and stronger. So,
I think that's key, Mike, because I think you have to ask yourself the why. Why am I not passionate anymore? Or why am I not as passionate as I was? Why am I choosing not to do the planning? Why am I choosing not to do this whole excellence process? And if you're really true to your answers, I think that will speak highly to your motivation and goals. And I hate to say it, one of the things I have seen, not as much with business leaders, but a lot with salespeople, is they really don't have that goal that drives them.
Yeah.
Right? They have no why behind the what.
And I love that the step we put in green here for passion is accelerate. I think it is the accelerant, the fuel for your business that drives everything else. And we don't have time to get into all 24 steps today. And even on top of this, just hinting to people, there are over 53 tools, exercises that we go through when we work with you in this process to help you do each one of these 24 steps and come to answers. So we're not just going to say, hey, you should go make a plan for every position in your company. Good luck with that. We're going to break it down, and we're going to help you do that over the course of time working with you, right? You want to talk about these 24 steps and the tools and how we do that?
Well, I do. I think the 24 steps are critical. And I like people initially to go through them in order because it just makes sense. But once you get through an order, you're going to realize very quickly that there is no order to them because they're so interwoven that one step 12 will affect step 23. So there's that constant interlacing and interwoven tapestry of this thing called the road to excellence. And it doesn't end. As soon as you think it ends, then your odds are you're no longer that excellent category. So it's that, and just because you're excellent doesn't mean you never have any issues. It just means you've identified them quickly and are on top of them, yeah. Right? Instead of ignoring them. So the 24 steps, some are easier than others. Some of the tools, you'll breeze right through, pretty simple. Others you're going to have with you for the whole year because it's just a constant. I have to look at it again. I have to look at it again, right? So.
Yeah, I see a couple on here. Some you might already be doing, like conducting employee surveys or regular performance reviews. Other ones you might not have heard of at all, like identifying a playbook and capturing best practices and stuff. So I think there's a lot to unpack there. As we wrap up, I have one more question for you, and we would love it if you shared this in the chat because we love to hear your passion and your takeaways because that's what makes it worth us doing. So type in the chat there, what's one thing you will start doing for your organization or one thing you will stop doing based on what you heard today? Things you might think about are attitudes you need to have as a leader, behaviors, goals, plans, and actions you can do, or techniques and tools that maybe you need to look into that could really help you take your business to the next level. Dave, final thoughts?
I see one in there that says, I'm going to stop procrastinating. I got to ask you when.
I love that one. It's so funny how so many of these things, and we mentioned pushback a few times too. I think that would be one of my final takeaways is the one thing that you don't want to hear or the one thing you don't want to work on is sometimes the one that you need to focus on the most. You said that earlier. So if you looked at one of those six P's and you were like, I'm not working on passion, that's exactly the one that your employees hope you will be doing. Yep. Right? And it goes for all 6 of the P's or all 24 of the steps. It's the one that you least want to do typically is that blind spot that's getting you. So Dave, as we wrap up here, I want to share the link one more time for everybody. Sandler.com/smallbusiness for more information. There's a ton of great leadership resources there. You can get our new apps. You can connect with a local Sandler trainer to help you work through this process and much more. Go to Sandler.com/smallbusiness for more information. A couple of minutes left, Dave. Any final thoughts on organizational excellence as a process? Maybe who's right for the training or any of that other stuff?
Well, I think any entrepreneur, business leader, CEO, executive, I think is right for it. But I think you have to realize you have to roll your sleeves up. And these first few go rounds of this are tough. They're tough. It's going to be a lot of internalizing of things, a lot of mental and emotional dealing with things. It is hard work. There's no other way of saying it. But we do know that the harder you work at it as you go through the first few rotations, the easier it is to maintain that excellent organization. You can never ignore it, but it's just easier because now you've got so much of it. It becomes such a part of your culture that it starts self-policing, if you will. It starts doing it on its own with your oversight. So hard work in the beginning so that you really get those results later on.
Yeah, and I think I would also mention just about the benefit of having a coach and a trainer here to walk through this with you, because it is hard work, but that's why we're in this and that's why we're in the business. So we're not shying away from that part. But I know a lot of people this year have had a rough, tough, stressful year, and it could be said true of any year, right? That most of the time, if you've been in business long enough, you've had some good years and you've had some bad years, and you've been through 2008 or 2001, and you know that you can rebuild this. I think we're getting to the point in this year that if you haven't given up, if you just want to shut the doors and go get a job for somebody else, great, go ahead and do that. If you're serious about committing to your business, making it through this, growing, maybe having your best year ever in 2020 or 2021, hire a coach and somebody that can be on your side. As the leader and the executive, a lot of times you don't have anybody to talk to, or you don't have anybody to bring your problems and challenges to. And that's what we're here for as Sandler trainers. We can be the corner man to put you back together, ice those bandages and get you back out there and help you keep running through this difficult time. And we want to be there to help you. So we appreciate you taking the time today. Again, for more information, sandler.com/small business. Until we meet again, good luck and good selling, everybody. Hope you enjoyed the webinar. Thanks.
Thank you.